The evening sky was deep orange fading into purple, and the air carried that calm silence that comes after a long day. Nia stepped out of the small office where she worked as an assistant. Her feet ached from standing too long, and her eyes were heavy from staring at papers all day. The streets were quieter than usual. The nearby shops had closed early, and only a few cars passed now and then. She sighed as she looked at her watch. The buses had stopped running an hour ago. It wasn't the first time this had happened, but tonight felt different. The air seemed too still. She thought about walking home, but her house was far, and she didn't feel safe walking through the dark roads alone. Nia hugged her bag close to her chest. She wished she had asked her colleague to wait with her, but everyone had already left. She looked down the road, hoping for a taxi, but none came. Just when she began to think she would have to walk, a black car slowly approached from the corner. Its headlights cut through the dim light, and it came to a smooth stop near where she stood. The window rolled down, and a man leaned slightly toward her. He had a neat shirt, short hair, and a calm expression. "You can't stand here alone," he said in a kind tone. "It's not safe at this hour. Where are you going?" Nia took a small step back, unsure. The man looked harmless, even friendly. His car was clean and smelled faintly of lemon air freshener. He smiled again and said, "I'm heading toward the main road. Maybe I can drop you off there." Nia hesitated. Her heart told her to be careful, but her tired mind wanted to believe him. She looked at the empty street again. No buses, no people, only the sound of crickets in the distance. The thought of walking all the way home made her sigh. "My name is Cato," the man added. "You can sit in the back if you like. I understand if you don't feel comfortable in front." His voice was gentle, and his words felt respectful. That small gesture, offering the back seat, made her feel a little safer. She studied him for a few more seconds. He didn't seem threatening. Slowly, she nodded and said, "All right, thank you. Just to the main road, please." "Of course," Cato said with a warm smile. Nia opened the back door and got in. The seat was soft, and she could hear light music playing on the radio, a familiar old tune. For a moment, she felt at ease. Maybe she had worried for nothing. Maybe this was just a kind stranger helping her out. As the car began to move, the city lights blurred past the window. Nia watched them fade into smaller buildings and dark trees. She tried to relax, telling herself that people still did kind things. "You work nearby?" Cato asked casually. "Yes," she replied. "At the small office near the post road." He nodded. "I pass there often. It's a quiet area. You shouldn't stay so late." "I know," Nia said softly. "Sometimes work takes longer." Cato laughed lightly. "Work always takes longer, doesn't it?" His tone was easy, almost friendly. He spoke like someone who liked small talk, and that helped her relax. They drove for a few minutes in silence after that. The streetlights grew fewer, and the sound of the tires on the road filled the car. Nia looked out the window and thought about the dinner she would make when she got home. Maybe rice and stew, something simple. She was lost in thought when Cato spoke again. "Do you stay alone?" The question made her blink. She hesitated before answering. "No. I live with my aunt," she said quickly, even though she didn't. Cato smiled, but she could see it through the rearview mirror. "That's good," he said. "It's not good for a lady to live alone." Something in his voice made her shift slightly in her seat. It was still polite, but the warmth from before felt different now, heavier, as if his words carried a meaning she couldn't name. She looked outside again. The road was quiet, too quiet. Only the hum of the engine filled her ears. She gripped her bag tightly, pretending to check her phone. The screen was almost dead, only 5% battery left. Cato glanced at her through the mirror. "You don't need to worry," he said lightly, as if reading her thoughts. "You're safe with me." Nia forced a small smile. "Thank you," she murmured, though inside, her heart began to beat a little faster. The car turned onto another road. Nia frowned. This wasn't the usual way to the main road. This isn't the turn," she said carefully. Cato laughed softly. "Don't worry. It's a shorter route. You'll see." She nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed on the window. The streetlights disappeared one by one until they were driving through a darker stretch. A stray dog crossed the road, and the car slowed for a moment. Nia's fingers tightened around her phone. She thought about telling him to stop, but fear held her voice. She tried to remember the number of the road signs she had seen earlier. Maybe she could tell someone later, if she needed to. But who would she tell? She shook her head, trying to stay calm. Maybe he really was just taking a shortcut. Kato hummed softly with the radio music, tapping the steering wheel. His face looked relaxed, but something about that calmness felt wrong. Nia thought of her mother's voice in her head, "Never take rides from strangers, no matter how kind they seem." She had heard that warning many times growing up. Why hadn't she listened tonight? She closed her eyes for a second and whispered a small prayer in her heart. The car soon reached a junction where a small group of people stood waiting for taxis. Seeing them made her feel slightly better. She thought of asking Kato to stop right there, but before she could speak, he said, "We'll be at the main road soon. Just a few more minutes." Nia nodded slowly. She didn't want to anger him. She decided she would wait until she saw a brighter, busier place before asking to get out. Kato's phone rang, and he answered with one hand on the wheel. His tone changed, quiet and serious. "Yes, I'm almost there," he said. "Don't worry. I'll handle it." Nia's stomach turned. Almost there. Handle what? She glanced around, trying to see any sign of where they were. The buildings were unfamiliar. Her palms began to sweat. She spoke softly, trying not to sound scared. "I think I'll get down here. My aunt called. She's waiting." Kato didn't answer right away. His eyes met hers in the mirror. For a second, she felt trapped under that gaze. Then he smiled, but it wasn't the same smile as before. It was slower, colder. "Don't worry," he said again. "We're almost there." Nia's heart pounded. The world outside the window blurred as the car picked up speed. She knew something was wrong now. Every instinct told her she should never have entered that car. She pressed her hand against the door handle, testing if it was locked. It wasn't. Her breath came faster, but she forced herself to stay quiet. She didn't want him to notice. The radio played a soft song, but all she could hear was her heartbeat in her ears. The night outside grew darker, and with every passing second, she realized what her mother had meant. Sometimes danger doesn't shout. It smiles. If only she knew then what she knew now, she would never have entered that car. The car glided smoothly through the quiet evening roads, and for a short while, Nia began to feel more at ease. The city lights flashed by in short glimmers, painting soft reflections on the car window. Kato seemed pleasant. He asked simple questions, and his tone was easygoing. "So you work nearby?" he asked, his voice calm, as if they had known each other for years. "Yes," Nia replied, still clutching her small handbag. "I work at an office just behind the main post road." Kato nodded and smiled. "Ah, that place. I've seen it many times. You must work hard. It's not safe for young women to be alone at this hour." Nia smiled weakly. "Yes, sometimes I work late when my boss needs help." He laughed softly. "You must be a very loyal worker then." The compliment made her blush a little, though she didn't know why. She wasn't used to strangers being so polite. She turned her eyes back to the window. The houses outside looked familiar at first, the bakery on the corner, the small clinic, all the places she usually passed on her way home. But as the car moved further, the familiar places started disappearing. The roads began to look different, wider, and darker. Nia frowned. Kato kept talking. "So, do you live with your parents?" "No, with my aunt," she replied quickly, remembering her earlier lie. "She waits for me if I'm late." "That's good," he said softly, eyes still fixed on the road. "Family is everything." There was something about the way he said it, slow and thoughtful, that made her uneasy. The air inside the car suddenly felt heavier. The small smile that had rested on her face faded. A few minutes passed in silence. Then Nia noticed something. Kato had just passed the road that led directly to her neighborhood. She leaned forward slightly. "You missed my street," she said in a polite tone. Kato glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his eyes catching hers for just a second. "Oh, don't worry," he said casually. "This way is faster." She blinked. "But my road was back there," she said, her voice softer now. He chuckled lightly, almost as if to calm her. "Trust me. I know these streets better than the drivers around here. This one will save us time." Nia nodded slowly, but her heart began to beat faster. She looked outside the window again. The road was unfamiliar now. Tall trees, fewer streetlights, fewer people walking. The hum of the engine grew louder in her ears. She swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. "Are we still going toward the main road?" she asked, forcing a small laugh. Cato didn't answer right away. His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Yes, we are," he said finally. "You don't need to be scared." "I'm not scared," Nia lied. Her voice trembled slightly. Inside, though, she was. Every second that passed made her doubt him more. Something about the way he looked through the mirror, his smile, his steady eyes, made her want to open the door and run. But she couldn't. The car was moving too fast. She tried to distract herself, to breathe. She pulled out her phone, but the battery icon blinked red, only 1% left. She put it away, pretending she wasn't worried. Cato turned the radio on. A soft song began to play. It was an old song, one that reminded her of her childhood. But in that moment, even the music made her uneasy. She wanted to believe he was just being kind, that maybe he truly knew a shorter way home. But her instincts whispered otherwise. She decided to keep talking, hoping it would make the situation feel normal. "You said you drive this route often?" "Yes," Cato said, smiling faintly. "I drive people all around the city. I know every turn." Nia nodded again, even though she didn't believe him. She had never seen him before, and she had lived in this area for years. They passed another street, and she looked at the sign. It was one she didn't recognize. She glanced again at Cato. "I think we're going far," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "Don't worry," he said. "You'll get home soon." He said it kindly, but his tone no longer felt warm. It felt firm, like a statement, not reassurance. Nia's eyes darted to the door handle beside her. She wondered if it was locked. She could test it, but what if he noticed? She didn't want him to see that she was nervous. She decided to stay calm, to wait until she saw people or a bus stop, and then ask him to stop. The car turned again, this time into a narrower road. The streetlights were dimmer now. Her fingers began to tremble. "Why are we going this way?" she asked, her voice sharper this time. Cato's eyes met hers in the mirror again. "It's a shortcut," he said softly. "You'll see." But she didn't want to see. Every bone in her body told her something was wrong. She remembered her mother's voice, warning her years ago, "Always trust your feeling before your fear. If something doesn't feel right, it isn't." Her throat went dry. "Please, I can get out here," she said suddenly. "I'll walk from here." Cato laughed, but it wasn't friendly anymore. "No need," he said. "This road will lead you straight to your aunt's house." The way he said, "your aunt's house," made her shiver. She hadn't told him where exactly she lived. How could he know? Her pulse quickened. She looked at the window. The trees outside blurred as the car moved faster. The night air felt colder, heavier. She tried again, her voice trembling. "Please, I said I can walk from here." Cato's hands tightened around the wheel. "Sit back and relax," he said flatly. "You'll be home soon." Something in his tone made her stop talking. She sank back into the seat, trying to think clearly. Maybe if she waited until the next corner, she could open the door. Maybe there would be people around. She looked for lights, buildings, anything, but the road seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. Her mind raced. What if she screamed? But what if no one heard her? The sound of the engine filled the silence. Cato hummed softly along with the radio, as if nothing was wrong. His calmness frightened her more than anger would have. Nia glanced down at her phone again. Dead. She closed her eyes for a second, trying not to panic. She needed to act, but she didn't know how yet. The car reached a curve, and for a brief second, she saw a small store in the distance, its lights still on. Her heart leaped. She turned quickly and said, "Please stop here. That's my cousin's shop. I'll get down here." Cato didn't slow down. "No need," he said again, his tone firm. Nia's chest tightened. Her fingers moved to the door handle slowly, carefully. She pressed it slightly. It opened a little. Not locked. Relief and fear mixed in her chest. She didn't move yet. She couldn't risk jumping while the car was fast. She looked ahead and saw a speed bump not far away. That could be her chance. Her heartbeat quickened as she made her plan silently. She didn't even blink. When the car slowed down slightly to cross the bump, she took a deep breath and whispered a small prayer. Her hand gripped the handle firmly. But before she could act, Cato spoke again, his voice low and calm. "You're brave," he said. "But it's better to stay quiet." Her body froze. He knew she was planning something. The car moved on, quiet and steady, but inside Nia's chest, the storm had begun. Fear sat heavy on her heart, but beneath it, a spark of determination grew. She didn't know how yet, but she was going to escape. The night outside stretched dark and endless, and the reflection of Cato's eyes in the mirror glowed faintly under the dim light. They no longer looked kind. The car fell into a heavy silence. The air felt thick, pressing on Nia's chest. The hum of the engine and the faint rhythm of her heartbeat were the only sounds she could hear. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap, but she tried her best to hide it. She looked out the window again, praying for a light, a person, any sign of life. Then she saw it, a faint glow in the distance. As the car rolled closer, the glow became clearer. It was a fuel station, small and old, but bright enough to catch her eye. A worker in a blue uniform stood outside, cleaning the windshield of another car. Her heart jumped. It was the first sign of hope she had seen since she got in Cato's car. Her mind raced. That's it. That's my chance. But she had to be careful. If she panicked too soon, he might lock the doors or speed past before she could act. She needed to make him stop on his own. She reached slowly for her phone, pretending to check a message. The screen was dark. The phone had died minutes ago. But maybe, just maybe, she could use it to trick him. Nia lifted it to her ear and spoke loudly, making her voice steady. "Yes, I'm almost there," she said clearly, as if speaking to someone. "Yes, the police station near the fuel station. I see it now." Cato's eyes flicked toward her in the mirror. His calm expression shifted. The corners of his mouth twitched. Nia kept going. "Yes, officer, I'll wait right at the entrance. Thank you for sending someone." She tried to make her voice firm, as if she really was speaking to a police officer. Cato's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Police?" he asked, his voice lower than before. Nia met his eyes through the mirror, forcing a small, brave smile. "Yes," she said softly. "My cousin's friend works there. I told him I'd be there in 5 minutes." Cato's expression changed again, just slightly, but enough for her to notice. His jaw tensed. He slowed the car a little. The engine's hum softened. The lights of the fuel station grew brighter ahead. Nia's heart pounded. "It's working." She leaned back, pretending to relax. "They said they'd wait outside. I told them I was in a black car with a kind driver." Cato didn't reply. His fingers drummed once on the wheel. Then, to her relief, he began to slow down even more. The car crawled closer to the fuel station. The sound of another engine nearby filled the night air. She could see a small convenience shop beside the pumps and 2 people talking near the door. She clutched her bag tightly, ready to move. When the car reached the edge of the fuel station, Cato turned slightly toward her. "You didn't have to call the police," he said in a calm voice. "I told you I would take you home safely." His tone was smooth again, but it didn't sound kind anymore. It sounded careful, like someone trying to fix a mistake. Nia forced a shaky smile. "I just wanted them to know I'm safe. They worry too much," she said. He said nothing, just stared at the road ahead. The car rolled slower and slower until it finally stopped near one of the fuel pumps. The moment it did, Nia didn't hesitate. She grabbed her bag and pushed the door open quickly. "Thank you for the ride," she said fast, pretending to sound cheerful. Then she stepped out before he could answer. Her legs shook as her feet hit the ground, but she didn't show it. She walked briskly toward the small shop at the corner of the station, waving as if greeting someone inside. "Hey, I'm here," she called out, even though she knew no one there. The worker by the pump looked up in surprise. "Evening, ma'am," he said kindly. Nia forced a smile and went closer to him. "Hi. I'm just waiting for my cousin. He should be here any second," she said quickly. Then she turned slightly, pretending to look for someone. Cato had parked a few feet away, watching her through the windshield. His eyes followed her movements carefully. For a few long seconds, he didn't move. Then he looked around and noticed the worker watching too. Another car pulled up behind him, honking lightly for space. Nia saw him hesitate. His hand rested on the gear stick. She held her breath. Then, finally, he turned his head away, shifted the car into gear, and drove off without a word. The moment the car disappeared around the corner, Nia's knees almost gave out. She leaned against a pillar, breathing hard, her heart pounding in her ears. The worker noticed her trembling. "Miss, are you okay?" he asked. She nodded quickly, wiping her face. "Yes, I almost got in trouble." "Do you want to call someone?" the man asked. Nia reached for her phone, remembering it was dead. "Please," she whispered. "Can I use your phone?" The man nodded and handed her his small phone. She dialed her aunt's number from memory. Her hands still shook as she held it to her ear. When her aunt's voice came through, Nia's tears spilled over. "Auntie, please come get me," she said. "I'm at the fuel station near the old road. Please hurry." Her aunt's worried voice came through the line, asking what happened, but Nia could barely speak. She just kept saying, "Please come soon." When she hung up, the worker guided her to a chair near the shop. He brought her a small bottle of water. "You look scared," he said softly. Nia nodded. "A man offered me a ride," she said. "I thought he was just being kind." The man frowned. "That's dangerous, miss. You shouldn't trust strangers at night." "I know," she whispered. "I know now." A few minutes later, her aunt arrived, her face pale with fear. She hugged Nia tightly, refusing to let go. "What happened? Who was he?" she asked. Nia just shook her head, unable to explain everything yet. "I'll tell you when we get home," she said softly. As they drove away, she looked back one last time at the fuel station lights fading behind them. The fear in her chest slowly turned into relief. For the first time that night, she felt safe. When they reached home, her aunt sat her down and listened as Nia told the full story, from the moment Cato offered her a ride to the second he drove away. Her aunt's face was full of shock. "You did the right thing," she said. "If you hadn't pretended to be on the phone, who knows what would have happened?" Nia nodded slowly. She thought about how fast everything had changed, from a quiet ride home to a night she would never forget. Later, when she went to bed, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the black car, the mirror, the cold eyes. But then she remembered the lights of the fuel station, the man's kind face, and the sound of her aunt's voice. Those memories reminded her that she had survived. She had been smart, and she had listened to the voice inside her that told her to act. As she lay awake, she whispered to herself, "Never again." Outside, the night was calm again, as if nothing had happened. But inside Nia's heart, a lesson had been carved deep: trust your instincts, and never step into a car just because someone smiles. She stared at her ceiling until her eyes grew heavy. And before she fell asleep, one last thought passed through her mind. If only she had known, she would never have entered that car. The car raced through the night, and Nia could feel her heart beating faster with every turn of the wheels. The dark trees on both sides of the road seemed to close in on her, and the silence between her and Cato felt heavier than before. She could hear the steady rhythm of the engine and the faint hum of the tires rolling over the rough road. Her hands gripped her bag tightly. She had to think fast. The road ahead looked long and empty, but up ahead she saw something, a small glow of light, just barely visible. She recognized it as the same fuel station she had seen earlier, still glowing faintly under the moonlight. That light gave her courage. She knew this was her only chance. She turned her eyes toward the mirror. Cato's gaze was fixed on the road, but his face was unreadable now, calm, serious, and almost cold. The warmth he had shown earlier was gone. Nia swallowed hard and tried to steady her breathing. Her mind raced with thoughts. She had to get out before it was too late. The car slowed slightly as it approached a speed bump. Nia's fingers moved quietly toward the door handle. She prayed he wouldn't notice. Her hand shook, but she forced herself to act naturally, pretending to adjust her bag. The car bumped once, and she heard the click of the lock as she slid it open quietly. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought he might hear it. The car rolled over another bump, and for a brief moment, Cato took his eyes off the road to glance at the rearview mirror. Nia froze. Their eyes met. "What are you doing?" he asked sharply. "Just fixing my bag," she said quickly, forcing a nervous laugh. Her voice trembled slightly, but she tried to make it sound calm. He didn't reply. His eyes stayed on her reflection a second longer before turning back to the road. Another speed bump came into view. Nia's heartbeat quickened. She took a deep breath, knowing it was now or never. As the car slowed again, she whispered to herself, "Please, God, help me." Then, before she could think twice, she pushed the door open and jumped. The wind hit her face hard, and the ground rushed up fast. She fell onto the side of the road, her hands scraping against the gravel. Pain shot through her arms and knees, but she didn't stop. She rolled over, gasping, and scrambled to her feet. The sound of the car's tires screeched behind her. Cato's voice shouted something, but she didn't look back. She ran. Her legs felt weak, but fear pushed her forward. She saw the lights of the fuel station just ahead, bright, steady, safe. She screamed, "Help! Please help me!" Her voice cracked, but it carried through the quiet night. The security guard at the station, a tall man in a blue jacket, turned his head sharply. When he saw her running, he dropped his flashlight and ran toward her. Two men near the shop looked up too, confusion spreading across their faces. "Help me!" Nia cried again. "He's chasing me!" The guard reached her just as she stumbled near the entrance. He caught her by the shoulders. "What happened?" he asked quickly. Before Nia could answer, the sound of the black car's tires filled the air. Cato's headlights flashed once, blinding for a second, then dimmed. He was only a short distance away. The guard stepped forward, pulling Nia behind him. "Hey! What's going on?" the guard shouted, waving his flashlight at the car. Cato hesitated. His hands gripped the wheel tightly. For a moment, it looked like he might stop. But then the guard shouted again, louder this time, and other people began to gather. Someone pulled out a phone, pointing it toward the car to take a picture. That was enough. Cato slammed his foot on the gas. The car roared and sped away into the darkness, tires screeching against the asphalt. Within seconds, he disappeared down the road. The guard kept his eyes on the fading lights until they vanished completely. Then he turned to Nia, who was trembling so badly she could barely stand. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Nia nodded weakly, tears falling down her face. I jumped from the car," she said in a shaking voice. "He wasn't taking me home. He lied." The guard helped her sit on a low step near the fuel pump. "You're safe now," he said gently. "You're safe, miss." Another woman came out from the small shop, holding a bottle of water and a piece of cloth. "Here," she said kindly, placing the bottle in Nia's hands. "Drink this. You're okay." Nia's hands were shaking too much to open the bottle, so the woman helped her. The cold water soothed her dry throat, but her body still trembled. She looked at the road where Cato had disappeared and whispered, "He would have hurt me." The guard frowned. "We'll call the police," he said. "You should tell them what happened." Nia nodded weakly. Her knees were scraped, her palms red with small cuts, but none of that mattered. She was alive. She was out of that car. The woman beside her held her hand and said softly, "You were brave. Most people would have frozen. But you fought." Nia's eyes filled again. She didn't feel brave, she felt terrified. But somewhere deep down, she knew that jumping had saved her life. If she hadn't, she might have disappeared like so many others she had heard about in stories that always started the same way. She entered a car with a stranger. A few minutes later, a police van arrived. The officers spoke to the guard and then turned to Nia. She told them everything, how Cato offered her a ride, how he missed her street, how he smiled differently, and how she had finally jumped when she saw the chance. One of the officers wrote notes while the other asked questions. They promised to search for the black car and check the cameras around the fuel station. When they finished, the officer looked at her and said, "You did the right thing, miss. You were smart to act when you did." Nia nodded slowly, still shaking. "I just wanted to go home," she said softly. "We'll make sure you do," the officer said kindly. The guard stood nearby, arms crossed, watching protectively. "She's safe now," he said. When the police offered to take her home, Nia agreed. Before getting into the van, she turned one last time toward the spot where Cato's car had sped away. The night was quiet again, but she could still hear the echo of the tires in her mind. Her body hurt, but her heart beat strong with relief. The streetlights above flickered faintly, and she took a deep breath of the cool night air. As the police van started to move, Nia whispered under her breath, "Thank you." She wasn't sure if she was thanking the guard, the police, or the voice inside her that told her to jump, maybe all of them. When they reached her neighborhood, her aunt ran out to meet her, tears in her eyes. She hugged Nia tightly and refused to let go. "You're home," her aunt whispered. "You're home, my girl." Nia held her close, her voice breaking as she said, "I thought I wouldn't make it." But she had. She was safe now, surrounded by light and love instead of darkness and fear. That night, as she sat in bed with her aunt watching over her, she realized something. Sometimes courage doesn't roar. Sometimes it's a quiet whisper that says, "Jump now, or you may never get another chance." And she had listened. Outside, the night returned to silence, but Nia knew it would never feel the same again. The road, the car, the man, they would always remind her of what she had escaped. But she also knew one thing for sure: she was stronger than she had ever realized. She was safe. And that was enough. A few days had passed since that terrifying night. The sun rose bright over the city, but for Nia, mornings still felt heavy. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still see the black car, hear the sound of the tires screeching, and feel the cold air rushing past her as she jumped. Sleep came in short, restless bursts. But each morning, she reminded herself, she was alive. Her aunt refused to let her go anywhere alone. She would say, "You've been through enough, my child. Stay close for now." Nia didn't argue. The safety of home felt like a gift she no longer took for granted. She often sat by the window, watching the busy street outside, the normal rhythm of life she once took as ordinary. Now, even seeing children walking to school or neighbors chatting made her feel thankful. 3 days later, the police called. Her aunt answered first, then handed the phone to Nia. "Miss Nia," the officer said kindly, "we have news. We caught him." For a second, Nia didn't understand. "You mean Cato?" she whispered. "Yes," the officer confirmed. "We tracked him using the CCTV footage from the fuel station. His car was identified, and we found him hiding near the outskirts of town. He's in custody now." Nia's hands trembled slightly as she held the phone. "Thank you," she said softly. After the call ended, she sat in silence for a while. The fear she had been holding finally began to lift, replaced by relief. She could breathe a little deeper now, knowing he couldn't hurt anyone else. That night, she slept better. For the first time in days, her dreams were not filled with headlights and darkness, but with faces of people who had helped her. The security guard, the kind woman at the shop, the police officers, and her aunt's comforting arms. She realized how many strangers had stood by her side when she needed them most. The next morning, Nia woke up with a new thought. She couldn't change what had happened, but maybe she could help someone else avoid it. Maybe she could turn her fear into something meaningful. She decided to share her story. It started small. She spoke at her aunt's church one Sunday. At first, her voice trembled. The crowd was quiet, listening as she described the night, the empty road, the friendly stranger, the missed turn, and the moment she jumped. Every detail felt heavy to tell, but she forced herself to continue. When she finished, the room stayed silent for a long second. Then an older woman stood up, her eyes full of tears, and said, "You were brave, my child. You saved yourself. And now you're saving others." That moment changed something in Nia. Soon, more people asked her to speak, at schools, women's groups, and small community meetings. She never exaggerated or made her story dramatic. She spoke simply, with honesty. Her words were plain, but they carried power. She always ended with the same message: always be careful. Not every kind face is safe. Sometimes danger hides behind a smile. Listen to your heart. If it feels wrong, don't go. Her story spread quickly. People began to share it online, adding captions like, "Nia's courage saved her life." Others used her name as a reminder for their daughters, sisters, and friends. They would say, "Remember what happened to that girl, Nia? Always stay alert." The police even invited her to join a safety awareness program. They asked her to speak to young women about trusting their instincts and being cautious when traveling alone. She agreed gladly. One day, while walking home with her aunt after one of these events, a young girl approached her shyly. "Are you the lady from the story?" she asked. Nia smiled. "I suppose I am." The girl nodded. "Because of your story, I didn't get into a stranger's car last week. A man offered me a ride, but I remembered what you said. I called my brother instead." For a moment, Nia couldn't speak. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of gratitude. She knelt down and hugged the girl. "You did the right thing," she whispered. "Always trust yourself." When the girl walked away, Nia looked at her aunt and said softly, "Maybe that's why I survived, so I could warn others." Her aunt smiled, her eyes warm. "Yes," she said. "Your pain became someone else's protection." Weeks passed, and Nia continued to heal. The bruises on her knees faded, but the memory of that night stayed with her. Still, it no longer haunted her the same way. Instead of fear, it reminded her of her strength, the moment she refused to stay silent, the moment she chose to fight for her life. Sometimes, late at night, she would sit on the balcony, staring at the city lights. They no longer seemed frightening. They reminded her of hope, small lights that can guide someone through darkness. One evening, she received another call from the police. They told her that Kato had confessed. He had done the same to others before, but no one had escaped. Nia's report, her quick thinking, and the fuel station's camera had stopped him from hurting more women. After she hung up, she sat quietly, thinking about all the lives that might now be safe because she had acted that night. Her fear had turned into something powerful, a warning that could save many. The next weekend, Nia organized a small gathering with other women in her neighborhood. They talked about safety, shared tips, and made a promise to always look out for one another. She noticed how united they felt, not afraid, but aware, strong, and ready to protect themselves and each other. When the meeting ended, an older woman approached her and said, "You've done something important, Nia. You've turned darkness into light." Those words stayed with her. Months later, Nia's story was shared by local radio stations and small newspapers. People across different towns heard about the girl who escaped and helped others do the same. Some called her brave, others called her lucky. But Nia didn't think of herself as either. She thought of herself as someone who listened, to her heart, to her instincts, and to the small voice that told her run. One day, she stood outside her office, waiting for her aunt to pick her up. A black car passed by, similar to Kato's, and for a brief second, her body tensed. But then she took a deep breath and smiled faintly. She was not the same frightened girl anymore. She was stronger, wiser, and grateful. As she got into her aunt's car, her aunt asked, "Are you okay, Nia?" She nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "Just remembering how far I've come." Her aunt reached over and squeezed her hand. "You're a fighter," she said. Nia smiled, looking out the window at the busy streets, full of life, full of people who would never know how close she had come to disappearing. But she was still here. And because of her story, others would stay safe too. That night, as she prepared for bed, she looked at herself in the mirror. Her reflection stared back, stronger, calmer, more certain. She whispered to herself, "Not every kind face is safe. But kindness still exists. You just have to be wise enough to see the difference." Her phone buzzed, another message from a young woman she didn't know. It said, "Thank you. Your story saved me tonight." Nia smiled through her tears. She turned off her light, lay down, and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long while, her heart was at peace. She had turned her fear into courage, her pain into protection, and her story into strength. And as she drifted to sleep, her last thought was simple but full of truth. If only she knew that night, she would survive to save others. The end.